An Arab billionaire buys a single mother at an auction to have a child. What he discovers later shocks him. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Everyone. Layla was a young woman facing many hardships with her son. Amen. With no other options. She decided to participate in an unusual auction where women were sold like objects and purchased by wealthy, powerful men. For her, it wasn't a choice, it was her only chance. Sitting in a corner of the fancy hall, Layla felt the heavy weight of the choices that had brought her there. Her heart beat quickly and with no rhythm. Each beat filled with fear and uncertainty about what was coming. She kept thinking of her son. Amen. Who was with her elderly neighbor that night? The late bills. The possible eviction. The night's amen. Who went to bed hungry? Had made her make this very hard decision. The event organizer, a man in a perfect suit and a fake smile, came up to her. He told her to give instructions. Remember, Layla, stay calm. Smile. Don't look directly at the guests. He told her before walking away. The hall was filled with men in fancy clothes, watching each woman as if they were rare and valuable art. Layla felt a lump in her throat as her name was called. Lot No. 23. The organizer announced in his theatrical, calculated voice. Layla's legs trembled as she climbed the steps to the brightly lit stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her. The heat, the bright lights made her sweat. She tried to stay proud. She felt the others staring at her. The organizer kept using words to describe her as beautiful, which made Layla feel even more exposed. The crowd said something in agreement. Suddenly, a deep, commanding voice said, $1 million. The room became completely silent. Everyone looked at a man with tan skin and piercing eyes sitting in the last row. He looked like a powerful and important person. Karim Al-Fayed, a rich and private Arab businessman, had made his offer. The event organizer was surprised by the opening bid and repeated it to make sure he heard it correctly. No one else made a bid. He announced that the painting had been sold. Wearing a satisfied smile, Layla felt weak in her legs but kept her cool as she stepped off the stage. Her life had just changed forever. Karim approached her, his face serious and hard to read. We need to talk about the terms, he said calmly, holding out his hand to guide her. Layla hesitated. She followed him to a private room where the fate she had sealed on the stage would officially be decided. The room was big and nicely decorated. Karim pointed to an armchair for Layla to sit in. He walked over to a table near the door and picked up an envelope that had been left there. Beforehand, he gave her the contract. He said to give it to Layla. She took it. Her hands were shaking as she read it. The silence in the room was very loud as she read the first few parts. She started to breathe more heavily as she got to the important part. You want me to have a child and leave it with you? She asked, her voice shaking. Karim crossed his arms and nodded. I need a break. Child is born. You'll leave. The contract makes that very clear. Layla stood up, a wave of indignation and fear washing over her. I can't do this. I won't abandon my own child. Karim's eyes narrowed. His voice remained steady. You knew what you were getting into when you entered that auction. There's no room for regret now. This is inhumane. Layla shot back, gripping the contract tightly. Do you think you can just buy a child and get rid of the mother? Kareem stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. I paid $1 million for you, Layla. This wasn't a whim. Now you have no choice. Layla felt her heart race. She knew she was trapped in a situation she couldn't easily escape. Kareem placed a pen on the table in front of her. Sign the contract. Once the baby is born, you'll receive the money and freedom to move on with your life. Layla stared at the contract, her hands shaking with anger and sadness. She thought of Ayman and the sacrifice she was making to secure his future. Tears threatened to fall. She held them back. This isn't right, she murmured. Sitting down again, Kareem leaned in, his gaze intense. What's right or wrong doesn't matter here. What matters is that you honor the agreement. Layla knew she had no choice. With a heavy heart, she picked up the pen and signed the contract. Kareem took the document and said, "Very well. Tomorrow morning, we'll do the necessary medical exams. You'll be taken to my mansion. Get some rest." He left the room, leaving Layla alone with her thoughts and regrets. She looked at her signature on the contract, feeling as though she had made her own destiny. The next day, a limousine waited for Layla in front of the small apartment where she lived. Saying goodbye to Ayman had been short and sad. She had told him she needed to work far away for a few months and promised to call whenever she could. The child, innocent and unaware, waved with a confident smile, unaware of what his mother was going through. The journey to the mansion was silent. Layla stared out the window, watching the desert landscape gradually give way to modern, luxurious structures. When they arrived, the property's grandeur left her speechless. Tall iron gates opened to reveal immaculate gardens and a mansion that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. The mansion was silent. Layla stared out the window, watching the desert landscape gradually give way to modern, luxurious structures. When they arrived, the property's grandeur left her speechless. Tall iron gates opened to reveal immaculate gardens and a mansion that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Kareem was waiting at the entrance, his expression as serious as ever. He guided her inside and briefly explained the rooms and the house rules. Your privacy will be respected. I expect you to fulfill your part of the agreement without question, he said before leaving her in the care of a staff member named Amira. Amira, a kind middle. He waited at the entrance, looking serious. He guided her inside and briefly explained the rooms and the house rules. Your privacy will be respected. I expect you to fulfill your part of the agreement without question, he said before leaving her with a staff member named Amira. Amira, a kind middle-aged woman, showed Layla to her room. The space was furnished with elegant decor and soft tones, a stark contrast to the simplicity of her previous life. On the bed lay clothes and accessories selected for her. If you need anything, I'll be nearby, Amira said with a warm smile. Layla thanked her. She felt like a stranger in this place. That night, as she gazed at the horizon from her room's balcony, her thoughts turned to Ayman. She felt pain being away from him. She had to believe she was doing what was best to secure his future. The sound of knocking on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Curran. Tomorrow we'll visit my trusted doctor, he told her before leaving. Layla nodded silently. The weight of her decision grew heavier with each passing moment. There was no turning back now. The next morning, Layla woke up early. The silence of the mansion was more unsettling than comforting. Her first night there had been sleepless, filled with constant thoughts about what lay ahead. The bed was soft. The sheets were silk. The weight of reality made peace impossible to find. Soon, Amira knocked on the door to escort her to Curran's doctor. The journey through the mansion was marked by its clear luxury. Hallways with Persian rugs. Paintings by famous artists. Big windows showing the meticulously maintained gardens. Layla barely had time to take it all in before stepping into the limousine that would take them to the clinic. The doctor's office was in a modern building in the middle of Dubai. Dar Ibrahim. A man with a kind face and a voice that made you feel better, greeted Layla professionally. After thorough examinations, he said that everything was in perfect condition to begin the fertilization process. Layla nodded without saying anything, trying to hide her discomfort. Karim stayed away from everyone during the process, watching from a distance with his usual calm expression. This was just another step toward fulfilling his responsibilities. For Layla, it was a painful reminder that at the end of those 9 months, she would face the heartbreak of leaving behind a piece of herself. Back at the mansion, Layla tried to distract herself by exploring the place. Every room seemed more extravagant than the last, as if Karim's wealth knew no limits. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves. An indoor pool surrounded by marble columns. A music room filled with exotic instruments. Despite its splendor, the mansion felt empty and soulless. Layla noticed that although Karim lived surrounded by beauty, his life seemed marked by deep loneliness. He rarely smiled. His few acts of courtesy were cold and calculated. In the first few days, Karim limited his interactions with Layla to practical matters. He made sure everything was in line with the contract. Never attempted to build a personal connection. Layla, on the other hand, she felt more and more out of place. She spent her nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how her son was doing. Her mornings trying to accept the fact that soon she would carry a child she couldn't call her own. In the second week, Karim hosted a formal dinner at the mansion for some business associates. Layla was told to dress elegantly and to go with Karim as part of the agreement. The dress she wore was stunning. She felt unsure as she walked down the grand staircase. The guests in the hall looked at her with curiosity. Some people greeted her politely, while others exchanged glances that made her feel exposed. Karim, however, stayed by her side the entire time, introducing her as my special guest. "Are you okay?" he asked in a rare moment of concern as they stepped aside to a quieter corner. "I'm trying to adjust," Layla replied honestly. Karim nodded but said nothing more. Social events were a formality, an extension of his obligations. Layla, however, it was a plunge into a world she didn't fully understand. After dinner, Layla went up to her room, exhausted. Before sleeping, she called her neighbor to check on Ayman. Her son's cheerful voice made her feel better. It also made her cry. She really wanted to go back. She knew she couldn't. As time went on, Layla noticed small details about Karim that showed he was more than just what he seemed. He was very particular and demanding. He also showed moments of kindness. One afternoon, she found him in the garden, watering a rare plant that he really liked. "This plant belongs to my mother," he explained. Noticing Layla's curiosity, she used to say that taking care of it made her feel peaceful. Layla felt sorry for him. The first time, Kareem seemed less like a scary person and more like a man trying to deal with his own pain. She began to realize that although their reasons for doing things were different, both of them carried heavy loads. Ayman also began to share more with Layla. During the long afternoons at the mansion, the housekeeper shared stories about Kareem's life, recounting how he had taken on responsibilities at a very young age after his parents died. These conversations helped Layla better understand the man who, until then, it seemed impossible to get through to him. Even so, she felt lonely. Layla tried not to get attached to the mansion or Kareem, reminding herself that she wouldn't be there forever. She found comfort in her walks through the gardens and in the quiet night she spent looking at the stars from her balcony. One evening, Kareem knocked on her door. He seemed less strict than usual. His expression was a little softer. "We need to talk," he said. Entering, Layla sat down, expecting him to give her more instructions or demands. Instead, Kareem seemed unsure, as if he was trying to find the right words. "I know this arrangement is hard for you," you began. "I don't want to make things more difficult. I just want you to know that I respect your courage." Despite everything, Layla was surprised. Kareem's words were unexpectedly kind. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before: vulnerability. The moment was short. He started. "I don't want to make things more difficult for you. I just want you to know that I respect your courage." Layla was surprised. Kareem's words were unexpectedly kind. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before: he was vulnerable. The moment was short. It was enough to make her doubt his character. Maybe Kareem wasn't as cold as he appeared. Maybe behind the facade, there was someone as broken as she was. After he left, Layla found herself thinking about their conversation. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she felt there might be she had started to wonder if there might be more to their relationship than met the eye. The days at the mansion continued slowly. Each moment seemed to add a new layer to the complex relationship between Layla and Kareem. They were like puzzle pieces, trying to fit together amidst the circumstances that had brought them together. Layla knew that time was passing. That soon she would carry Kareem's child. This reality terrified her. It also stirred a growing curiosity: who was the man who had asked her to make such a profound sacrifice? Life at the mansion began to follow a more predictable rhythm. Layla was still thinking about her decision. She started to notice small details about the house and her new routine. The garden was her safe space. It was a place where she could feel the warmth of the sun and listen to the sound of water flowing through the fountains. She noticed that Kareem also spent a lot of time in the garden. He didn't try to start conversations. Layla could tell he was watching her. There was a feeling of tension in the air. They both knew it. They didn't say anything about it. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, Layla saw Kareem cutting a tree. When he saw her, he looked up for a second and then continued working. It was clear that he didn't want to talk. "Do you like gardening?" Layla said, trying to start a conversation. "It helps me think," Kareem replied without looking at her. Layla saw that he was a bit more open. He was shy. He wasn't unfriendly. She decided to give him his space. She was also curious about the mystery behind his serious face. That night, during dinner, Kareem surprised Layla by sitting next to her at the table. Until then, her meals had been served by Amira in her room or a quiet corner of the house. He seemed calm. His presence was important. Are you adjusting? He asked, breaking the silence as he poured himself a glass of wine. I think so, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Karim studied her for a moment, as if trying to read her thoughts. I know it's not easy, he said. But I hope you understand that all of this is necessary. Necessary for whom? She wanted to ask. She kept the thought to herself. Instead, she nodded and continued eating in silence. There was something about the way he spoke that suggested. Beneath his imposing exterior, he was emotionally burdened. He carefully concealed it. As weeks passed, Layla began noticing small acts of kindness from Karim. He was discreet yet thoughtful. One day, after she casually mentioned missing certain foods from her homeland, Amira brought a tray of dishes prepared especially for her. Mr. Curry asked me to make these, Amira explained with a smile. Layla was surprised but said nothing. It was hard to decipher Karim's intentions. On one hand, he was cold and distant on the other. He seemed to care about her well. One morning, Layla found a collection of books neatly arranged on her bedside table. Among them were novels and stories she had mentioned during a casual conversation. She felt happy, realizing Karim paid attention to the little things. A defining moment occurred when Layla approached the mansion's music room. The door was slightly open. Soft piano notes echoed down the hallway. Curious, she stepped inside and saw Karim playing with great skill. You play the piano? She asked. Surprised, Karim looked up, clearly startled to have been caught in such an intimate moment. My mother taught me when I was a child, he replied. The door was slightly open. Soft piano notes echoed down the hallway. Curious, she stepped inside and saw Karim playing with great skill. You play the piano? She asked. Surprised, Karim looked up, clearly startled to have been caught in such an intimate moment. My mother taught me when I was a child, he said, pulling his hands away from the keyboard. It's beautiful, Layla remarked, stepping closer. He averted his gaze, as if unsure how to respond to a compliment. In that brief moment, Layla saw that beneath all his rigidity was someone with a deep emotional connection to his past. On another occasion, Layla was in the garden when he pulled his hands away from the keyboard. It's beautiful, Layla said, stepping closer. He averted his gaze, unsure how to respond to a compliment. In that brief moment, Layla saw that beneath his rigidity was someone with a deep emotional connection to his past. On another occasion, Layla was in the garden when a small bird fell from a branch, clearly injured. Without hesitation, she knelt and gently picked up the fragile creature. Karim appeared shortly after, watching her with curiosity. What will you do with it? He asked. I'll take care of it until it's strong enough to fly again, Layla replied. Karim remained silent. One evening, Layla met Karim in the hallway. Karim looked tired and soft-featured. Can't sleep? He asked. Sometimes it's hard with so much on my mind, Layla replied. I understand, Karim said. I'll take care of it until it's strong enough to fly again, Layla said. I admire that simple act of compassion, Karim said. The nights in the mansion were lonely. Layla found comfort in her routines. She enjoyed wandering the silent corridors, marveling at the architecture. One evening, she met Karim in the hallway. He looked tired. His face was less harsh than usual. He asked her if she couldn't sleep. She hesitated before answering. Sometimes it's hard with so much on my mind. Kareem nodded as though he understood completely. To her surprise, he invited her to have tea in the library seated among one evening. She met Kareem in the hallway. He looked tired. His face seemed softer than usual. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Layla hesitated before replying. "Sometimes it's hard with so much on my mind." Kareem nodded as though he understood completely. To her surprise, he invited her to have tea in the library, where they sat among shelves filled with books. They talked for longer than they ever had before. In that moment, Layla realized she was beginning to see beyond Kareem's mask. The household staff noticed the changes. 2. Amira, who had always been kind, now seemed closer to Layla, treating her like a friend. Even Kareem appeared more at ease in her presence. Though he was still formal, there was something different in the way he looked at her. As if he was beginning to see her in a new light. Layla, in turn, began to feel less isolated. Despite the nature of their contract, she found herself discovering small moments of connection and meaning in the seemingly empty mansion. Yet the reality of her situation still loomed over her like a shadow. Each day, she reminded herself that all of this was temporary. As the first signs of change in their dynamic emerged, Layla knew she needed to prepare for the challenges ahead. Kareem was a complex man. She was only just beginning to understand him. Understand the layers of his personality, deep down. She knew their journeys were only starting to intertwine on a deeper level. The days continued to pass. Layla found herself increasingly immersed in the mansion's routine, despite her efforts to maintain emotional distance. Small moments with Kareem began to leave an impression on her. She was impressed by him. He was interested in getting to know her better. He was shy about it. That I see in them the future. Something that needs to be nurtured with love and responsibility. He replied. That experience deeply moved Layla, who realized that Kareem had layers she had yet to uncover. Let's play a game. Little game with those who only read the comments. Type McDonald's in the comments. Only those who've made it this far will understand. Now, let's continue the story. Over time, small gestures brought them closer. Kareem began asking more about Layla's likes and interests. She, in turn, found ways to show appreciation for his attentiveness. Their conversations in the garden became a routine, as did their evenings in the library, where they shared books and discussed their stories. During one of those nights, Kareem asked a question that caught her off guard. If you could change anything about your past, what would it be? Layla remained silent for a few moments, thinking. I think I'd have chosen more wisely whom to trust. At the same time, I'm not sure I'd change everything. Without the wrong choices, I wouldn't have Ayman. Her son's name hung in the air like a shadow. Kareem sensed the weight of her words. Shifted the conversation, giving her space. Despite their growing connection, Layla still felt uncertain. She knew the contract between them was a barrier that couldn't be ignored. No matter how much she began to like Kareem, the thought of their time being limited to 9 months lingered in her mind. One night, as Layla gazed at the stars from her balcony, Kareem joined her. They sat in silence one evening. Layla met Kareem in the hallway. He looked tired. His face seemed softer than usual. Can't sleep? He asked. Layla hesitated before replying. Sometimes it's hard with so much on my mind. Kareem nodded as though he understood completely. Surprisingly, He invited her to have tea in the library. They sat and looked at the sky for a while. You think a lot about the future. Don't you? He asked. Breaking the silence. I can't help it, Layla admitted. All of this feels so temporary. Kareem turned to her. For a brief moment. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her hold her breath. The future can be built, Layla. It. One evening. She met Kareem in the hallway. He looked tired. His face seemed softer than usual. Can't sleep, he asked. Sometimes it's hard with so much on my mind. Layla said. Hesitating before replying. It's all about how we choose to handle the present. Kareem said. Nodding as though he understood completely. I feel a warmth from those words, Layla said. Surprised. Although he hadn't spoken directly. There was an implicit promise in his tone. Something that made her believe their destiny might still be unwritten. The staff at the mansion began to notice the change in atmosphere. The cold feeling that used to fill the place had gone away. A warmer, more welcoming feeling had replaced it. Amira was happy to see that Kareem seemed less alone and more open. Layla also noticed changes within herself. The first time in months. She felt like she was getting back in touch with a part of herself that she thought she'd lost. She felt like she was losing herself, even so. Layla knew she was approaching a crossroads. She knew that the feelings developing between her and Kareem could make things more complicated, but for now. She chose to enjoy the present. Even though the future was uncertain, dawn brought a soft light to the mansion. Layla felt restless. She didn't expect to feel such a strong connection to Kareem. The secret about Ayman was weighing on her. She was afraid Kareem would find out the truth. She also couldn't bear to keep it hidden any longer. After breakfast, Layla decided to walk through the gardens to clear her mind. She tried to lose herself among the flowers and trees. Her peace was interrupted when she heard Amira calling her urgently. Layla hurried back to the mansion and found Kareem in the living room. Holding a photograph, his expression was difficult to read. Who is this boy? He asked. His voice controlled but laden with emotion. She tried to clear her mind by distracting herself among the flowers and trees. But her peace was interrupted when she heard Amira calling her urgently. Layla hurried back to the mansion and found Kareem in the living room. Holding a photograph. Who is this boy? He asked. His voice controlled but tense. Layla froze. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Kareem had found it. He's my son, Layla admitted. Her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kareem walked slowly toward her. His dark eyes locking on hers. You lied to me, he said. His voice low but sharp. Why didn't you tell me from the start? Layla felt tears welling up. She forced herself to stay calm. I was afraid. I was afraid it would complicate everything. I was afraid you'd think I wasn't suitable for the contract. Kareem crossed his arms. Still scrutinizing her. And why did you agree to this? Knowing you'd have to leave another child behind. The question hit Layla like a blow. She took a deep breath before answering. I did it for him. The bills. The overdue rent. The nights he went to bed hungry. I had no other choice. Her words were filled with emotion. Kareem remained silent for a long moment. As though tension filled the air as Layla stood still. Unable to move. Kareem sat in his usual chair. A folder of documents in front of him. I've reviewed the terms of our contract. He began bluntly. There's nothing in it. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Karim had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karim walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locking on hers. "You lied to me." Processing everything I just heard. Finally. He turned and walked to the window. "You should have trusted me," he said, gazing at the horizon. Layla felt the weight of disappointment in his words. She couldn't hold back her tears. She knew this moment could shatter the connection they were building. She also knew she could not. "You can't keep lying to me." Later that night, Karim invited Layla to join him in the library. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a lamp, creating an intimate yet tense atmosphere. Karim sat in his usual chair, a folder of documents in front of him. "I've reviewed the terms of our contract," he began bluntly. "There's nothing in here that says you have to." Layla was nervous. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Karim had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karim walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locked on hers. "You lied to it. That mentions the possibility of you keeping secrets like this. However, it also doesn't address how to handle the situation we're in now." Layla felt a wave of panic. "Please. Don't send me away. I'll fulfill my part of the agreement. I promise." Karim raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not suggesting that. But trust is essential." Tension made Layla freeze. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Karim had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karim walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locking on hers. "You lied to me. And now we need to rebuild it." He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet, sliding it toward her so she could read. "I want you to see Ayman. You're allowed to visit him. On one condition: he cannot know the truth about our arrangement." "Not yet." Layla blinked, stunned. Karim's generosity caught her off guard. It also brought a fresh wave of guilt. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Her voice barely a whisper. Karim sighed, folding his hands on the table. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without answers. That I want your son to have at least part of your presence. Even if it's only temporary." Those words carried a pain Layla hadn't expected. Tension made Layla freeze. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Karim had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karim walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locking on hers. "You lied to." The first time, she felt she was beginning to understand the reasons behind Karim's distant behavior. He wasn't just a man seeking an heir, he was also someone with deep scars. The next day, Layla was taken to visit Ayman. The journey was long. Each mile brought her closer to her son. When she arrived, emotions. She felt overwhelmed. Ayman ran into her arms the moment he saw her. Layla held him tightly, as if she never wanted to let him go. "Mommy. You're back," he exclaimed. His voice filled with joy. Layla smiled. Her heart felt heavy. She knew this visit was only temporary. That soon she would have to leave him again. They spent the day. Tension made Layla freeze. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Karim had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karim walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locking on hers. "You lied to me," he said. "We used to play and laugh together. Just like in the old days." As night fell, Layla felt the weight of their impending goodbye. When the moment came, Ayman hugged her tightly, asking when she would return. "Soon, my love," she promised, even though she knew how uncertain that word was. Back at the mansion, Layla was both physically. Tension made Layla freeze. The photo in his hands was of Ayman. One of the few she had brought with her. She had hidden it carefully. Somehow Karim had found it. "He's my son," Layla admitted, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karim walked slowly toward her, his dark eyes locking on hers. "You lied to me," he said, his voice calm and emotionally drained. Karim was waiting for her in the living room. His expression was calm. "How is he?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine concern. Layla sank into the sofa across from him, feeling completely vulnerable. "He's well. He's happy. It's hard to leave him." Karim nodded as if he understood perfectly. He said nothing more. His gaze conveyed something that words couldn't express. In the days that followed, their relationship changed. There was a quiet understanding, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Karim became more considerate. Layla, in turn, began to trust him more. Small gestures like sharing a meal or chatting during a walk in the gardens became meaningful moments. One evening, as they sat in the library, Karim revealed something Layla hadn't expected. "My mother died when I was young," he said. "My father was always distant, focused on business. I grew up with responsibilities before I even understood what they meant." Layla. She watched him closely, realizing he was sharing something deeply personal. She said sincerely, "That must have been difficult." But she thought it shaped who he is today. No matter how hard she tries, she can't shake the feeling that something will always be missing. Layla felt an urge to comfort him. She noticed that Karim still kept some barriers up. Even so, that moment of vulnerability brought them closer together. As the months passed, their relationship continued to evolve. What had initially been a cold agreement was now marked by mutual respect and admiration. Layla began to see Karim not just as a powerful man, as someone capable of great humanity. Karim was surprised by Layla's strength and compassion. They knew that time was passing and that they would soon have to face the uncertain future. The days after Layla's visit to Amman brought a strange calm to the mansion. There was something different in the way Karim and Layla's relationship had always been tense. Now it felt more calm. However, they were still bound by a contract. This made them feel unhappy. Layla started to feel better when she did the same things she always did. Like walking in the garden in the morning, reading in the library in the afternoon, looking at the stars from the balcony at night. Even so, she never stopped thinking about her son. She always remembered the sound of his voice. One morning, while Layla was having her coffee, Karim arrived. He seemed more relaxed than usual. His expression held something almost friendly. "I want you to come with me today," he said. surprising her. The thought of her son never left her. The sound of his voice continued to echo in her mind. One morning, while having her coffee, Layla was surprised by Karim's arrival. He seemed more relaxed than usual. There was something almost friendly in his expression. "I want you to come with me today," he said. Breaking the silence. Layla looked at him, intrigued. "Where to?" she asked. "I have a meeting at one of my family's properties. It's a quiet place. I think you'll like it." She hesitated for a moment. Eventually agreed. Any opportunity to leave the mansion was welcome. The car ride was quiet. Not uncomfortable. Karim drove calmly, while Layla watched the scenery change as they left the city center. After nearly an hour, they arrived at a secluded property surrounded by sand dunes. The place was peaceful. "With a small house built in traditional Arabic style, this place was my mother's retreat," Karim explained as they stepped out of the car. "She used to come here whenever she needed peace." Layla followed Karim to the house, admiring its simplicity and charm unlike the mansion. Everything here felt more inviting. The walls were adorned with rugs and antique lanterns. The air was filled with the scent of aromatic herbs. Karim led her to a terrace overlooking the desert. Even so, she never stopped thinking about her son. The sound of his voice always filled her head. One morning, while Layla was drinking her coffee, Karim showed up. He seemed calmer than usual. His face had a friendly look. "I want you to come with me today," he said. Breaking the silence. The only sound was the soft wind. Layla sat in one of the wooden chairs, feeling more relaxed than she had in weeks. "This is the only place where I can think clearly," Karim said as he sat next to her. "It's beautiful," Layla replied, looking at the horizon. Karim didn't say anything for a few minutes. Moments before asking, "Do you miss your home?" Layla sighed, thinking about her life before everything happened. "I miss what it represented." A simple place, full of memories. Karim nodded, seeming to understand. There was something comforting about that moment. A connection that didn't need words. After visiting the property, the two went their separate ways. The relationship between Karim and Layla became more natural. He started involving her in more aspects of his life, like meetings with the mansion staff and decisions about the daily routine. For Layla, it was an opportunity to better understand the man behind the facade of a ruthless businessman. One evening, during dinner, Karim brought up an unexpected topic. "I've been thinking about making some changes to the mansion," he said casually. "Something to make it feel more welcoming." Layla raised her eyebrows, surprised. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to create a space where a family could feel at home," Karim replied, averting his gaze. Layla felt her heart tighten. It was the first time he had mentioned the possibility of a future that included more than just their contract. However, she knew there was still much to resolve before such a vision could become reality. One afternoon, as Layla walked through the gardens, she found Amira carrying a tray with. Even then, she couldn't stop thinking about her son. She kept hearing his voice in her head. One morning, Layla was enjoying her coffee when Karim showed up. He seemed calmer than usual. His face had a friendly look on it. "I want you to come with me today," he said, breaking the silence. "Tea and cookies?" The housekeeper looked happy. Layla said, "You seem especially cheerful today." "Amira. Did something happen?" Amira smiled, her eyes sparkling. "It's just nice to see how things are changing around here. The mansion has never felt so full of life." Layla felt her face flush. She didn't say anything. She knew Amira was talking about the change in her relationship with Kareem. Even though she was still unsure about the future. It was clear that something was growing between them. As time went on, Layla noticed that Kareem was also changing. He was spending more time with her. He was more open and friendly. She knew Amira was talking about the changes in her relationship with Kareem. Even though she was still unsure about the future. It was clear that something was growing between them. As time went on, Layla noticed that Kareem was also changing. He spent more time with her. He was more open and friendly. Their conversations, which used to be short and formal, now lasted for hours. They shared more and more about their lives. During one of these conversations, Kareem said something that touched Layla deeply. "I never knew how to deal with losing my mother," he confessed. His voice full of emotion. "She was the foundation of our family." Conversations that were once brief and formal now stretched for hours. With both of them sharing more about their lives. In one of those conversations, Kareem revealed something that deeply touched Layla. "I never knew how to cope with losing my mother," he confessed. His voice heavy with emotion. "She was the anchor of our family. When she was gone, everything fell apart." Layla felt a wave of empathy. She knew what it was like to lose someone important. Even if in different ways. That moment created an even stronger bond between them. Despite their growing closeness, Layla knew the contract was still a barrier. As much as she was growing attached to Kareem, the reality of their situation couldn't be ignored. She spent sleepless nights wondering about the future. Trying to balance her feelings with her responsibilities. One night, Kareem knocked on her door, asking to talk. He seemed unsettled. As if grappling with something important. "I know we have our limitations," he began. Sitting. Kareem was sitting in the chair across from Layla's bed. "I want you to know that I'm trying to understand what all of this means." Layla felt her heart race. There was something in his words that hinted at a significant shift. "I'm trying to," she replied honestly. Kareem nodded, seeming relieved to hear that. Despite the lingering uncertainties, both were willing to face whatever came next. Together, the mansion staff began to notice the impact of these changes. Amira, ever observant, remarked how Kareem seemed lighter. More human. Even the other employees commented on how Layla's presence had transformed the once cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla, her part, felt both were ready for whatever was next. The mansion staff noticed the changes. Amira, who was always watching, said that Kareem seemed lighter and more human. The other employees said that Layla's presence had changed the cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla, her part, felt more at home. Even though she had a contract, she started to see the mansion as more than just a temporary stop. It was a place where she was building something. Even if she wasn't yet sure what it would become. At the end of each day, as she looked at the stars, Layla knew she was approaching a turning point. The bond was forming. She felt like there was something between her and Kareem. She hadn't planned for it, both were changing. The journey they had started together was beginning to take a shape neither could have predicted. The days at the mansion continued to pass. Something undeniable lingered in the air. Layla and Kareem's connection. Both were ready to face whatever came next together. The mansion staff began to notice the impact of these changes. Amira, ever observant, noticed how Kareem seemed lighter and more human. Even the other employees commented on how Layla's presence had transformed the once cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla. Her part. Felt. Small gestures. Lingering glances. Extended conversations hinted at the boundaries of the contract were being challenged. Layla knew that every moment they shared was leading her closer to a critical juncture. One morning, as Kareem reviewed documents in his office, Layla walked in with a tray of coffee. He looked up, clearly surprised. He didn't say anything as she put the tray on the desk. "I thought you could use a break," she said, trying to sound casual. Kareem studied her for a moment before responding. "Thank you, lately. It's been hard to stay focused." Layla hesitated before sitting in the chair opposite him. "Something with the business?" He shook his head no. "There's just a lot to think about." The silence that followed was heavy. Not uncomfortable, both seemed to think about the unspoken words hanging between them. Layla finally broke the silence. "Do you feel you've made the right decision so far?" Kareem looked at her, his expression softening. "I am not sure. Life taught me to both were ready to face the future together." The mansion staff noticed the changes. Amira, always paying attention, said that Kareem seemed happier and more friendly. Even the other employees said that Layla's presence had changed the cold and unfriendly atmosphere. Layla. Her part. Felt. Practical. "Sometimes I wonder if being so strict has kept me from what's important." Layla felt his words were a little weak. The first time. He seemed to be saying that more was important to him more than his family and business responsibilities. In the days that followed, their routine began to change. Kareem started. He invited her to go with him to meetings and social events. He seemed interested in including her in his life. Layla began to understand the pressures and responsibilities he carried. During a charity dinner, Kareem introduced Layla as his partner. The guests exchanged curious glances. Kareem. They were ready to face whatever came next together. The mansion staff began to notice the impact of these changes. Amira, ever observant, noticed how Kareem seemed lighter and more human. Even the other employees commented on how Layla's presence had transformed the once cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla. Her part. Felt indifferent. To her, the opinions of others were irrelevant. Layla, however, felt uneasy under the weight of the attention she was receiving. "Are you okay?" Kareem asked, leading her to a quieter corner. "I'm getting used to it," Layla replied, forcing a smile. Kareem briefly held her hand. A gesture that surprised her, but also they were both ready to face whatever was next. One night, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, the staff at the mansion started to notice the impact of these changes. Amira, always paying attention, noticed that Kareem seemed lighter and more human. Even the other employees commented on how Layla's presence had transformed the once cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla. Her part. Felt. "Don't worry. I'm here with you." Those simple yet meaningful words filled Layla with an inexplicable warmth. Their moments of intimacy became more frequent. Layla noticed that Kareem was opening up more, sharing details about his life that had previously been hidden. He spoke about his childhood, his family. Both were ready to face whatever was next. The mansion staff started to notice the impact of these changes. Amira, always paying attention, noticed that Kareem seemed lighter and more human. Even the other employees said that Layla's presence had changed the cold and impersonal atmosphere. Layla. Her part. Felt the pressure and expectations of keeping the Al-Fayed legacy. In return, Layla shared stories of her own life. About the struggles of raising Aman and the small moments of joy she found amidst the challenges. Kareem listened attentively, showing a more human and open side. One night, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, Kareem stopped suddenly and said to Layla, "I want you to know that, despite everything you've shown me, I've learned things I'd never noticed before." "Like what?" Layla asked, surprised. "That there's more to life than obligations and contracts. That sometimes you need to make room for something new." Layla felt her heart race. She knew she was falling. Kareem stopped suddenly. "Layla, I want you to know that, despite everything you've shown me, you've made me aware of things I'd never noticed before. Layla, you've shown me that there's more to life than obligations and contracts. Sometimes you need to make room for something new." Layla felt her heart race. She knew she was falling for Kareem. She also knew the contract remained an unyielding barrier. The mansion staff began to notice the change in their dynamic. Amira, ever observant, started treating Layla with more warmth, almost as if she already saw her as a permanent part of the household. Other staff members exchanged knowing smiles whenever Kareem and Layla were getting along better. The contract still made things difficult. The staff at the mansion noticed the change in their relationship. Amira, who was always paying attention, started treating Layla more kindly, as if she already saw her as a permanent member of the household. Other staff members exchanged knowing smiles whenever they saw Kareem and Layla together. Despite this, Layla couldn't ignore the weight of reality. With each passing day, the end of the contract loomed closer. She feared losing everything, including the bond she had built with Kareem. One afternoon, as Layla was reading in the library, Kareem entered with a somber expression. They saw Kareem and Layla together. Despite this, Layla couldn't ignore the weight of reality. With each passing day, the end of the contract loomed closer. The fear of losing everything, including the bond she had built with Kareem, numbed her. One afternoon, as Layla was reading in the library, Kareem entered with a somber expression. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Layla set the book aside, sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Kareem asked, sitting across from her and clasping his hands on the table. "I know the contract outlines what should happen after the baby is born. Things have changed." Layla held. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Layla set the book aside, sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Kareem asked, sitting across from her and holding his hands on the table. "I know the contract outlines what should happen after the baby is born. Things have changed." Layla held her breath. She had known this moment would come. She wasn't prepared. "What do you mean by that?" she asked hesitantly. "I want to consider other options," Kareem said firmly. "I don't want you to just leave." Layla's heart raced. She didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what she hoped for. The fear. She knew this moment would come. She wasn't prepared. "What do you mean?" she asked hesitantly. "I want to consider other options," Kareem said firmly. "I don't want you to just leave," Layla said, her heart racing. She didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what I hoped for, she thought. Yet the fear of raising my expectations holds me back. "And what does that mean?" she finally asked. "It means we need to find a way to make this work together," Those words echoed in Layla's mind. She knew the situation was complicated. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. In the days that followed, Layla and Kareem her breath. She had known this moment would come. She wasn't prepared. "What do you mean by that?" she asked. Hesitant. "I want to consider other options," Kareem said firmly. "I don't want you to just leave." Layla's heart raced. She didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what she hoped for. The fear began to speak more openly about their fears and expectations. Both knew they were dealing with feelings far beyond what they had planned. Layla began envisioning a future with Kareem and her son, while Kareem started seeing the possibility of building a real family. Even so, they still faced challenges. Kareem remained haunted by his family's expectations, while Layla struggled to accept that her life would never be the same. Together they found strength in each other. On a quiet evening, as they watched the stars from the terrace, Kareem turned to Layla and said something she would never forget. "I didn't know what love was until you came into my life." Her breath. She had known this moment would come. She wasn't prepared. "What do you mean?" she asked hesitantly. "I want to consider other options," Kareem said firmly. "I don't want you to just leave," Layla said. Her heart raced. She didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what she hoped for. The fear. Tears streamed down Layla's face. This time they were from sadness. She knew that despite the difficulties, something special had blossomed between them. The mansion, once cold and isolated, now had the potential to be a home. The bond between them was stronger than any contract. As the sun began to set over the mansion cast a golden glow through the windows, Layla sat at the piano in the music room, one of her newfound sanctuaries. She gently ran her fingers over the keys, creating a melancholic melody. "Did you teach yourself to play?" Kareem asked, interrupting the gentle flow of music. "I want to consider other options," Kareem said firmly. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem added. Layla's heart raced. She didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what she hoped for. The fear. The mansion cast a golden glow through the windows. Layla sat at the piano in the music room, one of her newfound sanctuaries. She gently ran her fingers over the keys, creating a melancholic melody. "Did you teach yourself to play?" Kareem asked, interrupting the gentle flow of music. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. "I want to consider other options," Kareem added. "I don't want you to just leave," Kareem said. She had known this moment would come. She wasn't prepared. "What do you mean?" she asked hesitantly. "I want to consider other options," Kareem said firmly. I don't want you to just leave, Layla said. Her heart racing. She didn't know how to respond. What you're suggesting is exactly what I hoped for, she said, offering a faint smile. My mother taught me when I was little. It was something that connected us, even in difficult times. Kareem nodded, stepping closer. He sat beside her on the piano bench, watching her fingers glide delicately over the keys. You have talent, he said softly. Layla felt the weight of the tension between them. They didn't respond. Kareem remained silent for a few moments before continuing. Layla, I've been thinking a lot about what we've shared. About what brought us to this point. She stopped playing and turned to face him. The seriousness in his eyes made her realize he was about to address something important. What have you concluded? She asked, trying to stay calm. Kareem took a deep breath before speaking. I can't keep ignoring the feelings that have grown between us. But I also know that my past and my family's expectations have always been obstacles. Layla felt a mix of hope and fear. Kareem rarely spoke about his internal. She had known this moment would come. She wasn't prepared. What do you mean? She asked hesitantly. I want to consider other options, Kareem said firmly. I don't want you to just leave, Layla said. Her heart raced. She didn't know how to respond. What he was suggesting was exactly what I hoped for, she thought. Yet the fear. Struggling. She heard this as a sign that he was ready to confront his own demons. That same evening, Kareem invited her for a walk in the gardens. The gentle breeze and rustling leaves created a serene atmosphere. The weight of the impending conversation hung in the air. My father was a strict man, Kareem began as they walked. Side by side, he believed the family's honor was above all else. I grew up trying to meet his expectations. It shaped the way I see the world. Layla listened attentively, feeling the pain in Kareem's words. When my mother died, he became even more distant. Kareem continued. Everything became about maintaining control, ensuring nothing strayed from the plan, Kareem said. Layla felt a pang in her chest. She knew what it was like to battle loneliness. Hearing this from him made her realize that she had always been afraid of being alone. I don't want you to just leave, he continued. I want to consider other options. I don't want you to do that either, Layla said. She didn't know how to respond. I want to be with you, Kareem said firmly. I want to be with you too, Layla said softly. I want to be with you too, Kareem said. Nothing strayed from the plan, Kareem said. Layla felt a pang in her chest. And that's why you feel you need air? Layla asked softly. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Layla said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Layla said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Layla said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. I don't want you to do that either, Kareem said. That behind his impenetrable exterior was someone deeply human. The next day, Kareem asked Layla to join him on a trip to the desert. They left early and soon the vast golden sands stretched out before them like an endless ocean. When they arrived at a secluded oasis, Kareem explained that this was a special place for him, a retreat he visited when he needed clarity. This place reminds me that even in the middle of the desert, there's life. He said as they walked along the edge of the clear water. Layla felt connected to the moment. Sensing it was a turning point in their journey, they sat under a palm tree and Kareem began speaking again. That I've spent so much time lost in the past and what other people expect of me. I haven't taken the time to understand what I truly want. Layla looked at him, feeling his sincerity. Asked, "What do you want now?" Her heart was pounding. Kareem turned to her, his eyes shining in the sunlight. That I want to live differently. That I want to build something real. Something not defined by contracts or obligations. Layla felt the tears threatening to fall. Managed to hold them back. Those words were everything she had hoped to hear. Uncertainty still lingered between them when they returned to the mansion. The atmosphere between them felt lighter. Both knew there were still unresolved issues. Layla spent her nights thinking about her choices and how they would affect her son. She knew that to move forward, she would have to deal with her own pain and fears. One night, while looking at the starry sky from the balcony, Kareem joined her. He carried 2 cups of tea and gave one to Layla. Layla spent her nights thinking about her choices and how they would affect her son. She knew that to move forward, she would have to deal with her own pain and fears. One night, while looking at the stars from the balcony, Kareem joined her. He stood beside her in silence for a few moments. "You know, Layla," he began in a low voice, "I never thought I'd meet someone who would make me question everything I believed." She looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. "You've shown me that it's possible to have more than what we have now. There's room for something beyond responsibilities and expectations." Layla smiled faintly, her eyes showed emotion. "You've also shown me that it's possible to find strength in the midst of pain," she replied. "I wouldn't have come this far without you." In the days that followed, Kareem began taking concrete steps to change the dynamic between them. He reviewed the contract, while the clauses regarding Layla spent her nights thinking about her problems and how they would affect her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to deal with her own pain and fears. One night, while looking at the stars from the balcony, Kareem joined her. He had 2 cups of tea. He gave one to Layla and said that he wanted to find a solution that would be fair to both of them. Layla felt a mix of relief and worry. She knew there were still challenges ahead. She also sensed that they were finally moving in the right direction. For those who only read the comments, let's play a little game. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who've made it this far will understand now. Let's get back to the story. The mansion staff noticed the changes. Kareem's usual coldness had given way to a warmer demeanor and Layla seemed more confident and at ease. One afternoon Amira, ever observant, remarked to Layla, "I always unresolved issues." Layla spent her nights thinking about her choices and how they would affect her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to deal with her own pain and fears. One night, while looking at the stars from the balcony, Kareem joined her. He had 2 cups of tea. He gave one to Layla and knew Mr. Kareem had a good heart. He just needed someone to help him find it. Layla smiled, feeling grateful for everything that had happened so far. Despite the positive changes, Layla knew the future was still uncertain. She and Kareem would have to continue facing their fears and working together too. Layla spent her nights thinking about her choices and how they would affect her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to deal with her own pain and fears. One night, while looking at the stars from the balcony, Kareem joined her. He had 2 cups of tea. He gave one to Layla and said, "Let's build something lasting." For the first time, she felt hope. She felt that love could overcome the challenges. As the sun set again over the mansion, Layla and Kareem sat together on the terrace and watched the horizon. They knew the road ahead would be difficult. They were determined to face it together. The atmosphere in the mansion had visibly changed. The initial tension had been replaced with a lighter mood. The weight of the future still hung over Layla and Kareem. They both knew they were at a crossroads and that difficult decisions would need to be made. One morning, Kareem called Layla to his office. For a conversation, the room, usually imposing, felt more intimate on that occasion that he gestured for her to sit. Layla felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "That I've been thinking a lot about our agreement and everything that's happened since you arrived here," he began. His voice steady but filled with she was worried about her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to confront her own pain and set her fears aside. One night, while gazing at the starry sky from the balcony, Kareem joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea that he handed one to Layla and, emotion, Layla kept her gaze fixed on him. "Waiting, when we made this contract, my focus was on one goal, ensuring an heir for the family, but things have changed," Kareem continued, clasping his hands on the desk. "That I can no longer ignore the feelings that have developed between us." Layla's heart raced. This was something she had longed to hear. She also feared what might come next. "And what does that mean?" she asked softly. "It means I want to find a way to make this work for both of us. I want you to stay. Not as part of a contract. Because we choose to be together." Kareem's words felt like a glimmer of hope. Layla knew Layla spent her nights thinking about her problems and how they would affect her son. She knew that to move forward, she would need to deal with her own pain and fears. One night, while looking at the stars from the balcony, Kareem joined her. He carried 2 cups of tea. He gave one to Layla and it wouldn't be that simple. There were many layers to their situation. She needed to be sure they were both ready to face the consequences. That afternoon, as she walked through the gardens, Layla thought about what Kareem had said. As much as she felt strongly for him, the reality remained harsh. Her son, Ayman. She was in another city. The contract said she would leave after the baby was born. Later, Layla found Amira tending to some plants near the central fountain and decided to open up. "Amira, do you think I can trust Kareem?" Layla asked, her voice showing uncertainty. Amira looked up. She was in another city. The contract said she would leave after the baby was born. Later, Layla found Amira working on some plants near the main fountain and decided to confide in her. "Amira, do you think I can trust Kareem?" Layla asked, her voice showing uncertainty. Amira looked up, surprised by the question. Responded sincerely, "Mr. Kareem is a man of his word. He never makes promises he doesn't intend to keep. But he's also human. Like you. He's trying to find a balance between what he feels and what he needs to do." Layla absorbed those words, feeling slightly more at ease. Surprised by the question, honest in his response. "Mr. Kareem is a man of his word. He never makes promises he doesn't intend to keep. But he's also human. Layla, like you, is trying to find a balance between her feelings and what she needs to do." She absorbed those words, feeling slightly more at ease, though still conflicted. The next day, Kareem invited Layla to visit an orphanage he supported. He had done this before. This time it carried a different significance. Upon their arrival, the children greeted them with laughter and hugs. Layla felt a wave of warmth as she watched Kareem interact with them. His usual seriousness gave way to a gentler, more caring side. "You truly care about them," Layla said as they watched the children play. "They remind me that life is about more than responsibilities and business. There's beauty in simplicity." Kareem replied, looking at her with intensity. Those words deeply touched Layla. The first time, she felt that Kareem was truly ready to change. He wanted to give up some of the control he valued so much. He wanted to be more genuine. Back at the mansion, Kareem made the decision to revise the contract. He gathered his lawyers and adjusted several clauses. This ensured that Layla would have more freedom. It also ensured that she would be able to maintain contact with Ayman after the baby's birth. When he presented the changes to Layla, she was visibly moved. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, holding the contract with trembling hands. "Because I want you to know. You're not alone in this. I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me. Not because you have to." Tears streamed down Layla's face. This time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass. The bond between Kareem and Layla grew stronger. They started sharing stories, dreams, fears, creating a strong foundation for the future. One night, while they sat on the terrace, Kareem shared an idea he'd had for a while. "Layla, I want to meet Ayman." The idea surprised Layla. Guard. She remained silent for a few moments, thinking about what he had said. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. "Absolutely. He's part of you. I want to know every part of your life." Layla felt her heart warm. Kareem's willingness to include Ayman in their lives was a clear sign of his commitment to building something real. The trip to visit Ayman was. Kareem was nervous. He appeared calm. Ayman ran into Layla's arms and hugged her tightly. "Mommy," he exclaimed joyfully. Kareem watched the scene with a soft smile. When Layla introduced Ayman to him, the boy looked at Kareem curiously. "Are you my mom's friend?" Ayman asked innocently. "You're not alone. I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me. Not because you have to." Tears streamed down Layla's face. This time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass. The bond between Kareem and Layla grew stronger. Kareem knelt to meet the boy's eye level and replied, "Yes. I am. And I hope we can be friends, too." Ayman smiled. Layla felt a mix of relief and happiness. The interaction between the two was natural. As if Ayman could sense that Kareem was a safe presence. Back at the mansion, Layla began to feel that. The first time, she was truly building something. "You're not alone. I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me. Not because you have to." Tears streamed down Layla's face. This time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass. The bond between Kareem and Layla grew stronger. Her relationship with Kareem was no longer based solely on the contract. On trust and genuine feelings. She knew the road ahead would still require courage and patience. One evening, as they gazed at the stars together, Kareem held Layla's hand and said, "I know we still have a lot to face. I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes. It takes time to make this work." Layla felt her heart fill with hope. The first time, She truly believed that a future together was possible. Life at the Al Fayed mansion was becoming increasingly familiar to Layla. The bond between her and Kareem was still developing. After the visit with Ayman, something shifted. Kareem seemed more attentive, more present. Kareem had noticed how much Layla had changed since he had started living with her. One morning, while they were having coffee on the terrace, Kareem surprised her with a new idea. "That I want Ayman to live here," he said. His voice was calm. He was serious. Layla was surprised. "Are you serious?" she asked. Kareem nodded. "If you're not alone. I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me. Not because you have to." Tears streamed down Layla's face. This time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass. The bond between Kareem and Layla grew stronger. They wanted to build something together. "I want him to be part of it from the beginning." Layla's heart raced. The thought of having her son close was everything she had hoped for. Doubts lingered. What about the contract? She questioned hesitantly. Kareem took a deep breath before responding. "The contract doesn't have to be a barrier. We can adjust the "you're not alone." I don't want you to feel trapped. I want you to stay because you trust me. Not because you have to. Tears streamed down Layla's face. This time they were tears of relief and gratitude. The days continued to pass. The bond between Kareem and Layla grew stronger. They came up with terms to ensure Ayman has a place here without compromising anything. Layla remained silent, deeply moved by Kareem's willingness to adapt his life for her. It was a gesture that spoke louder than any words could. Preparations for Ayman's arrival began immediately. Kareem instructed Amira to prepare a room for him, decorated with elements Layla suggested. She wanted the space to feel warm and familiar, with touches that reminded Ayman of the home where he had grown up. On the day of Ayman's arrival, Layla was anxious. When the mansion doors opened and Ayman ran into her arms, she held him tightly, as if to shield him from everything. "This place is huge," Ayman exclaimed. She wanted the space to feel warm and familiar, with touches that reminded Ayman of the home where he had grown up. On the day of Ayman's arrival, Layla was anxious. When the mansion doors opened and Ayman ran into her arms, she held him tightly, as if to shield him from everything. "This place is huge," Ayman exclaimed, his eyes wide with curiosity as he looked around. Kareem, who had been observing from a distance, approached slowly. He knelt to Ayman's level and extended his hand. "Welcome, Ayman. I hope you'll like it here." The boy shook his hand with a shy smile. "Thank you, sir." Kareem smiled. Layla noticed that even in his seriousness, there was a Kareem, who had been watching from a distance, approached slowly. He got down on one knee next to Ayman and took his hand. "Welcome, Ayman. I hope you'll like it here." The boy shook his hand with a shy smile. "Thank you, sir." Kareem smiled. Layla noticed that even in his seriousness, he was trying to connect with Ayman. The first few days were a mix of adjustments and discoveries. Ayman quickly adapted to the luxurious environment of the mansion, exploring every corner and asking tedious questions about everything. Kareem, though reserved, showed patience and interest, calmly answering each of his questions. One night, as Layla tucked Ayman into bed, he asked, "Mom, is Mr. Kareem a good man?" Layla was surprised by the question. answered honestly. He is. He's learning to be better every day. Ayman smiled, satisfied with the answer. Soon fell asleep. Layla sat by his side, watching his peaceful face. For the first time in a long while. One night, as Layla tucked Ayman into bed, he asked, "Mom, is Mr. Kareem a good man?" Layla was surprised by the question. Answered honestly. He is. He's learning to be better every day. Ayman smiled, satisfied with the answer. Soon fell asleep. Layla sat by his side, watching his peaceful face. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Kareem and Ayman began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. She felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Kareem and Ayman began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. With the innocent curiosity of a child. Kareem chuckled, surprised by Ayman's frankness. "I do," he replied sincerely. "She's a very special woman." Ayman smiled and continued walking, leaving Kareem with a faint smile on his face. That simple yet meaningful exchange was a sign that their bond was growing stronger. One afternoon, she felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Kareem and Ayman began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. Kareem was in his office, reviewing documents. He saw her enter slowly, hesitating. "Can I interrupt?" she asked, holding a cup of tea. Kareem looked up and smiled. "Always," he said. She sat on the nearby sofa, watching as he returned his attention to the papers. There was something reassuring about seeing him so focused and dedicated. "You're working so hard for us," she said, breaking the silence. Kareem sat down his pen and looked at her directly. "Because you're worth it." The simplicity of his response made Layla's heart race. She knew that despite all the challenges, she was building something real with him. The months flew by. The Alfeed mansion was filled with She felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Kareem and Ayman began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. Different energy. The relationship between Kareem and Layla deepened. Ayman became an essential part of their home. Their bond flourished amidst new experiences. The anticipation of the baby's arrival brought them even closer. One evening, as Layla rested on the terrace, she felt a slight discomfort in her abdomen. Thinking it was just another pregnancy symptom, she tried to ignore it. The pain grew more intense. Alarmed, she called for Amira. who immediately rushed to Kareem. Layla is going into labor, Amira announced. Her eyes wide with urgency, Kareem ran to the bedroom. Finding Layla breathless, trying to manage the contractions that were going. Kareem and Ayman had started to bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who had once seemed distant, showed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. "To the hospital now," he said firmly, holding her hand. The drive to the hospital was tense. Kareem, usually composed, couldn't hide his worry. He gripped Layla's hand tightly, whispering words of encouragement as he watched her with anxious eyes. "Everything will be fine," he repeated reassuringly. "I'm here with you, Layla." Kareem and Ayman started to bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, showed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. The medical team took over. Kareem refused to leave Layla's side. He stayed with her throughout the labor, holding her hand and encouraging her every step of the way. Hours later, the sound of a baby's cry filled the room. Kareem looked at the tiny boy in his arms, his heart overflowing with emotion. "He's beautiful," Layla said. She felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Kareem and Ayman began to form a bond. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, revealed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. "Perfect," he said, tears welling in his eyes. Layla smiled, exhausted but overjoyed. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. A few days after the birth, Layla was resting in the bedroom with the baby in her arms when Kareem entered, holding an envelope. He sat beside her, his expression serious. His eyes showed him how much he cared. "I want you to know something," Kareem began as he opened the envelope. "This contract no longer holds any value." Before her surprised eyes, Kareem tore the document into small pieces, letting them fall to the floor. "Everything I've done so far has been for you and for our family. I don't. Do you want anything, not even a contract to define our future?" Kareem took Layla's hands and, with a gaze full of love, melted before her. "Layla, you've brought light into my life. You've taught me what true love is and what it means to have a family that I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, raising our children and facing whatever." She felt like she was on the right path. Over time, Kareem and Ayman started to become closer. They spent afternoons playing chess or walking in the gardens. Kareem, who once seemed so distant, showed a more relaxed and caring side. During one of their walks, Ayman suddenly stopped and looked up at Kareem. "Do you like my mom?" he asked. "She comes together." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a delicate ring with a diamond that softly reflected the light. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Layla's face. Her heart raced with joy. She could barely speak. "Yes, Kareem, I will." Ayman, who had been peeking through the door, ran toward them and hugged them tightly. "We're going to be a real family," he exclaimed, smiling. Kareem picked up the boy and celebrated with him the start of a new chapter in their lives. The months before the wedding were filled with joy and preparations. Layla wanted a ceremony that reflected her roots and the love they had built. Kareem made sure to fulfill her every wish. The mansion was transformed into a fairy tale setting with exotic flowers, delicate lights, details blending both Arabic and Western traditions. Finally, the big day arrived. The sun shone. The garden where the ceremony would take place was brightly lit. Layla looked stunning in a white dress with golden accents, while Ayman, dressed in a small formal suit, proudly carried the rings. As Layla walked down the aisle, Kareem's eyes filled with emotion. He watched her with admiration, as if seeing her for the first time. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, taking her hands. The vows were simple yet deeply meaningful. They promised love, respect, partnership, sealing their commitment with a kiss that drew heartfelt applause from the guests. The reception was a celebration of cultures and love. Traditional Arabic music blended with melodies from Layla's homeland, creating a festive and warm atmosphere. Ayman ran around the hall, thrilled with his new baby brother and the new life they were building. "This is the start of everything I've ever dreamed of," Layla said as she watched the scene beside Kareem. "And it's only the beginning," he replied, holding her hand. By the end of the night, under a starry sky, Kareem and Layla danced together, surrounded by family and friends celebrating a love that had overcome every barrier. It was the perfect ending to this unexpected journey, ended with a beautiful love story. While Ayman played with the baby, Kareem and Layla looked at each other, knowing they wanted to be together no matter what. They felt they had everything they needed: love, unity, a family that would keep growing. So, under the bright desert stars, their story ended perfectly. It was a new beginning full of hope, love, happiness. What do you think? Did Layla make the right decision by forgiving and marrying Kareem? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all our stories. Make sure to check out more heartwarming stories by clicking here on the end screen.